I'm Nina Thompson, and if you think blood makes you safe, wait till it tries to bury you alive. I wasn't born looking for war. But that night, stepping into their world with my son's hand in mine, I knew this wouldn't end with dinner and polite lies. Some houses aren't homes. Some families? They don't break you. They sharpen you. I didn't sleep it all the night before, not after the look my mother gave me before we left the house. It followed me into the next evening like a shadow I couldn't step out of. By the time I pulled up to the Thompsons' Westchester estate with Benji's small hand in mine, the sky was sliding into that soft autumn blue, cold, quiet, almost too honest. The kind of sky that exposes everything underneath it. The front doors were already wide open, and laughter spilled out, bright and polished, like everything else in this family. I stepped inside, and warmth hit my face. The heat from the chandeliers, the champagne glow, the hum of conversations that didn't falter when I entered. They simply went around me, the way water bends around a rock it refuses to acknowledge. Benji squeezed my palm. "Mommy, do we have to stay long?" "Just dinner," I whispered. "We'll be fine." I wore a smile that didn't reach my eyes, the one I had perfected over the years. Soft enough to look polite, empty enough to keep me safe. No one greeted us. No one even glanced up. Karen, in her glittering shawl, was directing servers to switch out the floral arrangements, but never once looked my way. Even the chair assigned to me said enough. It was placed at the far end of the long mahogany table, several seats away from Richard. Like I was a distant cousin, not his wife. I slid into the seat, smoothing Benji's hair as he climbed onto the one beside me. "You're okay?" I whispered, more to myself than to him. Karen's voice floated over from across the table. "Dinner's starting now that everyone is finally here." She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. The dig was sewn neatly into her tone. I kept my head down, breathing slow. Looking back now, I should have seen what was coming. That's where it all started. Evelyn, my mother, sat quietly on my right side. She wore her everyday cardigan, simple pearl earrings, nothing extravagant. Yet somehow, she radiated more presence than the room full of wealthy people who tried so hard to shine. She hadn't said much since she arrived, only watching, observing, almost calculating. I should have known that silence wasn't stillness. It was a storm clearing its throat. Halfway through the first course, she set down her fork and looked straight at me. "Nina," she said softly, "where's the house your father and I gave you?" The sound of her voice sliced through the air. A glass clinked against a plate, and then nothing. Silence spread across the table like a stain. Dozens of eyes pivoted toward me. My spine locked, breath snagging mid-chest. I felt the question pierce straight through every bruise I had carefully hidden under layers of composure. Benji looked up at me, confused by the sudden stillness. His hand slipped into mine again. Richard didn't reach for me.
He didn't even look at me.
Karen lifted an eyebrow, a tiny, satisfied curl forming at the corner of her mouth. Mom's gaze didn't waver. "It's been on my mind," she continued quietly. "You never told me what happened to it." I opened my mouth, but nothing came out, not a word, not a breath, not even a lie. My throat tightened until even swallowing felt like punishment. Inside my chest, panic throbbed hard. Have you ever trusted someone you shouldn't have? The question flickered across my mind like a warning whispered years too late. The silence dragged. No one broke it. Not one person offered me an escape route. Finally, Karen leaned forward, smiling as if discussing a trivial inconvenience. "It wasn't a good fit, Evelyn. They sold it years ago. Young couples change their minds. You know how it is."
A lie. Smooth.
Practiced. Cruel in its ease. My mother's expression didn't shift. She didn't argue. She didn't call Karen out. But she turned her eyes to me again, steady, unblinking, heavy with something I couldn't read. Not disappointment. Something sharper. Something that reached underneath the surface of me. Across the table, Richard kept cutting his steak, every slice loud enough to echo. I felt that sound in my bones. It was the sound of someone pretending not to hear you drowning. My voice stayed locked behind my teeth. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. I excused myself, telling Karen I needed to take Benji to the restroom. She waved a distracted hand, already mid-conversation with a woman who wore diamonds like a second skin. The second the door closed behind us, my knees almost buckled. I set Benji near the sink with a paper towel and leaned against the mirror, gripping its cold edge. A memory flashed so violently it hurt. Richard standing over me with documents, Karen's voice behind him. If she doesn't sign, we take the boy. My own shaking hand signing away the one thing my parents ever gave me. I haven't been forgotten, I whispered to the mirror. I've been erased. Benji tugged my sleeve. Mommy, I knelt and kissed his forehead. I'm okay, sweetheart. I'm right here. When I opened the restroom door, my mother was standing in the hallway, waiting, not angry, not pitying, just present. You all right? She asked quietly. I am fine. I lied. She held my gaze for a beat too long, the kind of look that felt like someone peeling back wallpaper to expose the damage underneath. Then she nodded once, stepping aside to let me pass. Back at the table, no one noticed we had been gone. Karen was laughing loudly, Richard leaning back in his chair, as if the world were exactly as it should be. The orchestra resumed playing soft classical pieces, the kind people use to mask tension rather than enjoy. I helped Karen fix her shawl when it slipped off her shoulder, an old reflex, not affection. She didn't thank me. I didn't expect her to. Mom leaned toward me, her voice low enough for only me to hear. Things aren't always what they seem. We'll talk later. A shiver rolled down my spine. Not from fear, but from the quiet certainty behind her words. There was something different in her tonight. A stillness that didn't feel passive. A stillness that felt like planning. Benji rested his head on my arm. I stroked his hair again, even as my pulse fluttered in my throat. Sometimes silence isn't peace, it's paralysis. Have you ever had to bite your tongue, just to keep the peace for someone you love? Nina couldn't sleep that night, not after the look her mother gave her before they left. The house was unnervingly quiet when we drove up, street lamps casting soft halos on damp pavement, the tires grove deep in shadow. Benji's sleepy head rested against my shoulder. I carried him inside, careful to keep his small breath steady, his innocence waiting behind his closed eyelids. Richard moved ahead of me, keys jangling, no glance, no pause, just the familiar click of the front door shutting us out from dinner's echo. I hung my coat. Karen's perfume still lingered on the hanger cloth, sweet and heavy. The scent pressed against my throat and stirred a bitter knot inside me. I folded the coat slowly, as if folding away a memory. I held my son gently, smoothing his hair. Sleep tight, I whispered. My voice was soft, quiet, a lullaby, but my heart pounded like war drums. Richard brushed past me on his way to the upstairs office. He didn't ask how dinner was. He didn't ask if I was okay. Silence was their comfort. That night, I walked through the empty rooms like a stranger. I moved without sound, aware of every creak in the floorboards. I placed Benji on his bed, tucked him in, brushed away a stray curl stuck to his forehead. The hush of the house pressed on me, the hush of unresolved truths waiting to break. A sharp knock came at the door. My heart jumped. I wasn't expecting anyone. Standing outside, Under the dull porch light was my mother, Evelyn Moore. Her coat hung tight around her, her face calm but eyes hard. Richard frowned.
Mom?
It's late. His voice edged irritation. Mom ignored him. She looked at me. Nina, she said quietly, we need to talk. That moment, something in me shifted, like frost cracking under pressure. I slid the door shut behind her. She didn't come inside. She didn't wait for an invitation. She simply stood on the porch as if poised between two worlds. Inside, my pulse hammered. Benji stirred, half asleep, watching me. Mom watched too. Her presence felt charged, alive. She placed a small USB drive on my kitchen table. What's this? I asked. Proof, she replied, because something doesn't add up. Her words were calm, but they hit like stones. I stared at the device. It was small, unremarkable, but in that moment, it felt like a detonator. Mom explained she had pulled public records on the house we lost. Transfer deeds, sale documents, timestamps. She found discrepancies, missing consent forms, forged signatures, odd timestamps that suggested coercion. A house given with love was sold under fear. My chest tightened. I tried to swallow, but bitterness rose sharp in my throat. Mom looked at me then, not as a daughter, but as a strategist. We're not acting on anger, she said. We're reclaiming facts. I nodded. My hands stilled. The weight of the USB felt heavy. Heavy with truth, with possibility. Suddenly memories flickered. Me, as a child, watching Mom discard old newspapers in a shredder. Me, listening to hushed voices in the night, her holding the door closed, her hand tight on the knob, her face pale but determined. I had thought she was whispering secrets of adult fear. Now I realized she was building defense. She leaned forward, voice soft but firm. People often mistake kindness for weakness. That's why they use it. Her words landed inside me. I felt something inside me awaken. Quiet, solid, like stone cooled after fire. I told her the story. About the forced sale. About how I signed papers holding Benji's crying face close. The price of survival I paid with my home. I didn't blame anyone.
I didn't yell.
I just spoke. Mom listened. Not shocked. Not angry. Just listening. Then she said gently, kindness is a choice, not a weakness. Tonight, they mistook it for permission. I held her gaze. I felt tears, anger, sorrow, grief, but also clarity. I won't let fear parent my life, I whispered. Mom nodded. Then we'll handle this. The right way. I wrapped my arms around her. For the first time in years, pain didn't feel like shame. It felt like memory. And memory didn't have to hurt. I stared at the USB drive on the table. The small device felt like a seed. I swallowed. Strength isn't loud. Sometimes it moves in whispers. I don't know what I'll do with this proof yet, but I know who I want to be when I use it. That night, I lay awake, not because of fear, but because for once, fear didn't have the final word. Have you ever learned something about a parent that changed how you saw your entire childhood? The morning light filtered in through the blinds like reluctant fingers, soft, pale, unsure of their place. My phone buzzed twice before I was fully awake. 2 missed calls. 1 text. Meet me at 10, 45th and Lex. Don't tell Richard. No explanation. No emojis. Just my mother, using punctuation like punctuation could cut glass. I stared at the message, feeling the weight of it sit on my chest. Doubt whispered, but so did something else. Resolve. Not yet loud, but real. Richard was still in bed, snoring lightly. I kissed Benji on the forehead, dressed him in his little navy jacket, and dropped him at daycare with a lie about errands and groceries. He clung to me longer than usual. I wore the gray wool scarf my mother had given me when I left for college. It used to smell like lavender. Now it smelled like who she might really be. Maybe the version of her I believed in was just the part she needed me to see. At exactly 10 o'clock, I pushed open the door to the cafe at 45th and Lexington. Quiet, unassuming, the kind of place you walk past 1,000 times and never notice. Evelyn sat at the back, facing the entrance, a half-drunk cup of black coffee and a folder beside her. She didn't wave. She just waited. "You're early," I said. "I'm always early. It's a habit from a different life," she replied. I raised an eyebrow. "Clerk life." She smiled faintly, then said, "No, Nina. Not clerk. Analyst. Data intelligence. Homeland Security." It took a moment for her words to sink in. I blinked. "You worked for the government?" She nodded, took a sip. "I wasn't the kind of agent that carried a badge. I found patterns. Deception leaves footprints. You just need to know where to look." Images from my childhood crashed in. How she always knew when I lied about curfew. How she once guessed a friend of mine was stealing from my purse. At the time, I chalked it up to motherly instinct. It wasn't instinct. It was training. "This isn't about revenge," she said. "It's about reclaiming what was never theirs to take." I didn't answer. I just watched her hand as it reached for mine. "They underestimated you because you trusted them. That's not your failure. That's their mistake." There it was. Her warmth. Beneath all the steel. She opened her laptop, revealing a PDF on screen. Real estate filings, county property logs, lines of legal language that would drown anyone else, but not her.
Not me now.
"This," she said, tapping a line, "shows your name on an outdated deed. This," she pointed again, "is an electronic signature. But you didn't sign that." My throat dried. The timestamp was from a night I was sedated after surgery. "They submitted false consent while you were recovering. It's fraud. Under New York State duress law, it's invalid." I leaned in, mind racing. "You're sure?" I consulted someone. Quietly. Not by name. "We've got enough to question the sale." My head swam, but underneath the nausea came something sharper. Clarity. "They didn't steal the house," I murmured. "They made me believe I gave it away." I copied the file to a secure USB drive. My hands didn't shake this time. "Now what?" I asked. Evelyn closed the laptop. "Now we wait." She wasn't being cryptic. She was being precise. "We don't make the first move. We let them grow comfortable. And we gather more." Her voice had that stillness again, like frozen water over something moving quickly underneath. She laid out a plan in clipped, legal-safe language, affidavits, timeline reconstructions, emotional impact reports, even checking Benji's daycare behavior logs, subtle signs of manipulation at home. I interrupted her, guilt seeping in. "Do I have to become them to beat them?" "No," she said. "But you have to stop offering your back as a landing pad." I didn't answer. Instead, she folded her napkin and placed it over my hand like she used to cover my lunch sandwiches. That small, familiar gesture broke something open in me. "You can win with grace," she said. "That's what makes it yours." We sat in silence for a moment, and in that quiet I saw her fully. Not just the woman who raised me, but the woman who could see 10 steps ahead.
She hadn't changed.
I had just finally seen her. "Sometimes it's not our enemies we need to see clearly," I whispered, "but those who stand closest." She nodded once, proud and unreadable. On the walk home, I felt the air sharpen. Midtown noise pressed around me, but I didn't hear it. I was somewhere else. Weeks ago, Richard had said something odd after tucking Benji in. Just want to get things in order before the trip. At the time, I thought he meant packing. Now, I wasn't so sure. Back home, I sat in front of my laptop and opened a secure email portal. I drafted a message to my former bank. Request: login history for account 9247XXXXX, particularly during the period of the property deposit transfer. I didn't flinch when I hit send. You don't yell when reclaiming truth. You document, date, and deliver. That night, just before I turned off my phone, a message popped up from an unknown number. Careful who you trust. Even mirrors lie. I stared at the screen, heart steady. Have you ever discovered someone's secret and had to rethink your entire relationship with them? I slid into the hallway outside the building on the Upper West Side just as the wind shifted. The air smelled of damp stone and exhaust, nothing like home. Evelyn stood under the dim overhead light, motioning me silently to follow. I obeyed, heart tight, every fiber alert. She didn't speak until we reached the mailbox cluster. She held up a USB stick, scratched around the edges, indifferent in appearance. This was delivered to the wrong address, she said quietly. My skin prickled. That silent plastic stick might hold more terror than any scream. Inside her apartment, she plugged it into her laptop. A grainy video popped up, night vision, shaky. I watched a silhouette move at the old family house's gate. A muffled voice. If she hesitates, remind her we have Benji. She'll sign. The voice was calm.
Terrifying.
I gripped the edge of the table. My nails pressed deep into wood. That's not fear, I whispered. That's extortion. Evelyn froze the frame. The timestamp matched the week I was in the hospital. The door slides locked. The signatures rigid. The sale certificate sealed. But this video, this wasn't paperwork. It was pressure. Plain as daylight. She turned to me, unease soft but real in her eyes. This meets duress standards under contract law. We can annul it. The words hit me like fists. Tears threatened, not from hope. From anger. From betrayal. From the cold fact that I once believed surrender was the only love left. I thought I was doing the right thing. I was wrong. I was coerced. Evelyn placed a hand gently on mine. Real love doesn't ask you to vanish. Her calm steadied me. I shook.
Quietly.
But not with fear. With resolve. I opened a blank envelope and put my wedding ring inside, slid it across the table. Not as revenge. As evidence. A symbol. Memories become proof, not chains. I drafted a voicemail for Richard. Don't answer alone. Consult a lawyer. My hands didn't tremble when I saved it. Evelyn watched with faint pride. You had strength all along. You just let it sleep. As I gathered documents, signed statements, footage files, labeling the folder, my truth, legally filed, I whispered to myself, you don't need to destroy someone to become whole again. Benji came in clutching a crayon drawing, stick figure family under a bright sun. No mother-in-law. No father-in-law. Just him.
Me.
A safe house. I smiled through tears. That night, Evelyn closed the laptop, gaze steady. They're planning a family meeting next week, she said. You're not invited yet. And the apartment lights seemed too bright for the secrets they held. The mail slot rattled late that morning, and I peered through the peephole at the white manila envelope lying on the doormat. My breath caught before I could reach for it. Inside was a court summons. Richard was contesting custody of Benji. The reason, a medical file from years ago citing postpartum depression. I stood frozen in my own kitchen, cold sweat gathering at my temples. That private fury I thought I buried, now resurfaced in black and white on an official form. My mother's voice drifted in from the other room. They're painting you as unstable. They want to destroy you through lies. Fear didn't rise in me, only a hard, central ache of betrayal. I dressed and followed her lead. She had arranged a meeting with Dr. Latham, the psychologist who treated me when Benji was born. The office smelled of leather chairs and muted lighting. Dr. Latham recalled details quietly, not to shame me, but to clarify the truth. I was never a danger to myself or my child. I was exhausted, abandoned, and overlooked. His calm testimony anchored me. She wasn't broken. She was surviving. Guilt fluttered in my chest. Had I ever looked that fragile? Could the nights of tears and silence count against me? Evelyn's hand on my shoulder steadied me. This isn't about weakness, she murmured. It's about how they prey on honesty. I opened a folded paper on the table, a personal declaration I wrote in stillness, not anger. I am not broken. I am not unworthy. Later that afternoon, I sat across from Karen at a mediation meeting. The room was sunlit but cold. She smiled politely, a practiced civility that couldn't hide her fear. We only want what's best for Benji, she said. Her voice smooth, mine steadier. You used my pain as your strategy, I told her. That's not negotiation. That's betrayal. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She simply offered a tight-lipped explanation. Meanwhile, my mother passed me a folder, affidavits from the nannies and friends of other wives, detailing emotional manipulation, subtle isolation, relentless pressure. Karen's calm facade cracked slightly when the mediator read the first statement aloud. Shock hung like dust in the air. I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. I could have used every file as a sword, but I didn't. I didn't want revenge. I wanted boundaries. I told Evelyn quietly, I don't want her destroyed. I want her stopped. That night, I pulled Benji close and read him a bedtime story straight from the evenings before all this mess. My voice didn't tremble for the first time in weeks. As I turned off the lamp, I whispered to myself, I am not who they say I am. I am who he believes I am. A neighbor dropped by the next morning, a gentle woman from across the hall. She left a warm pie at my door with a note. You've got a good kid. Whatever happens, you're doing something right. I felt gratitude that didn't taste like pity. I placed the pie on the table and nodded at the kindness that needed no explanation. Evelyn filed a formal motion the same day, citing coercion, duress, and character defamation. Dr. Latham's support letter, medical records, and our collected evidence went in together. I watched the legal machinery begin to grind. Not with vengeance, with justice. Not with loud anger, with quiet determination. In my journal I wrote, they can twist what we were, but they'll never touch who we've become. Finally, I picked up a photograph of Benji laughing in the sun, pure, unguarded joy. I slipped it into a blank envelope and mailed it to Karen. No note, no accusation, just a memory returned, unburdened. That evening, my mailbox held one more envelope, no stamp, no return address, just a heavy weight sealed inside. I sat on the steps, heart measured, hands steady. Whatever was inside would have to wait until morning. Have you ever been punished for being honest about your struggles? The note from the mailbox sat unopened on the kitchen table until dawn turned the windows gray. My coffee went cold while I stared at the envelope, fingers still curled around the morning light. Outside, the city stirred to life. I dropped Benji at daycare and returned to the empty apartment, heart clenching at every distant siren. That envelope needed to be opened. I lifted the flap. Inside, a surveillance still stared back at me, my own face entering a cafe 2 nights ago. Under the image, 6 handwritten words. There are things your mother never told you.
My throat closed.
Air went sharp. The world around me slowed to a hush. I called Evelyn. She answered on the third ring, calm voice cutting the silence. They're trying to rattle you, she said. And it's working. My chest tightened. I realized then her calm wasn't weakness. It was a warning. We hid behind drawn curtains. Every window sealed tight. She used a small wand scanner beneath tables and behind curtains. Old habits reawakened. At one point she looked at me, weary and soft. I wasn't just analysis. I was field operations. That confession rattled my bones. Questions I didn't know I had came roaring into focus. Are we safe? I asked. Evelyn didn't offer false promise. Instead, she handed me a burner phone and clear instructions. What to do if I disappeared. Her eyes stayed steady, bidding me brace for what might come next. I slipped the burner into my coat pocket, heavy like responsibility. By late afternoon, I found myself standing outside that cafe again. The bell chimed softly as I stepped in. Sunlight fell across empty tables, quiet as a secret waiting. I scanned the room slowly. Its edges felt sharp, suspicious. There at a corner table sat a man. Dark overcoat, brimmed hat low. He lifted his head as I passed. His eyes fixed on mine for a fraction of a second too long. Then he looked away. He left a receipt behind. In sharp block letters, someone had scrawled one word. Barry. My skin went still cold. I folded the paper carefully and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Outside, I called Detective Reyes. My voice was steady. I asked for help, quiet, unofficial help. His reply was measured, firm. I believe you, but I need more than fear to act. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. At home, I packed a small security camera near the front door. Evelyn showed me how to install it, guided my hands quietly. She didn't lecture, didn't preach. She just placed her palm on mine and said, "You don't have to fight like them. You just have to keep watch." That night, I stood in front of the mirror, flashlight low, the camera's red eye blinking. I touched the scar above my wrist, remnant of a fear I almost allowed to swallow me. And I whispered, maybe what they feared in her is waking in me. Then light flickered downstairs. A knock at exactly 2:14 a.m. I pressed my face against the peephole. No shape, just darkness. Under the door, a folded note. I retrieved it with gloves, unfolded it slowly. One message stared back. Don't trust the badge. My pulse didn't skip, but my breath came slower now. I swallowed the fear and let resolve seep in. What would you do if the person protecting you turned out to be the one who kept the darkest secrets? The hallway light washed over the conference room door as I pushed it open, Benji's backpack tucked firmly by my side. The neutral carpet swallowed my heels as I walked in. Across from me sat Karen Thompson, poised, perfect in a tailored suit, like she owned every mirror in the world. The mediator cleared her throat. We are here to discuss custody and living arrangements. I placed the folder, thick, legal grade, full of truth, on the polished table. Its weight was my quiet thunder. I lifted my chin, eyes forward. I was no longer a trembling whisper hidden in shadows. I was presence. Karen's voice came soft, gentle. All I want is what's best for Benji. Her tone motherly. Her eyes cold. I studied the lines around her mouth. The half-formed smile. The practiced calm. I answered evenly, voice calm but firm. Then trust should come before control. I remembered last Christmas, her dismissive laugh when I asked if I mattered beyond a title. That memory sat heavy in my chest, but it no longer broke me. It sharpened me. The mediator asked if there was evidence. I slid the folder across the table until it stopped at Karen's fingertips. Silence fell like a drawn curtain. The smell of polished wood mingled with tension. Karen's composure wavered. Richard's hand tightened on the edge of the table. Evelyn stood behind me, still as a sentinel, eyes soft but alert. The mediator opened the folder. Inside, photos, timestamps, receipts, video stills, the threat, the coercion, the proof of duress. The room felt smaller.
Hot.
Unfinished secrets pressed into every corner. Karen's voice came out thin. That was private. You can't bring private conversation here. I leaned forward, calm, steady. I signed under threat. Under New York state law, that makes consent invalid. I revoke it. My words landed like a verdict. The air froze. Karen's face paled. Richard opened his mouth, but the mediator raised a hand. The question hung. Do you withdraw your prior agreement? I nodded. The silence that followed was heavy, oppressive, like empty rooms covered in dust. Then I turned to Benji, his eyes wide, innocent. I spoke softly. You and I, we get to choose our peace now. My words weren't a condemnation. They were a choice. I looked at Karen again. Not with hate. With clarity. I am not looking to destroy anyone, I said. I'm just rebuilding what you helped try to erase.
No anger. No spectacle.
Just finality. Evelyn placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. Solidarity, not vengeance. The mediator accepted the motion.
Papers were signed.
Karen and Richard left in stunned silence. Their calm masks slipped. I walked out into late afternoon light. Trees bare, sunlight thin, but for the first time in months, the air felt like breath, not pressure. I folded the signed agreement, slipped it into my bag, like sealing a wound. Later, over weak coffee with Evelyn, I said quietly, "Freedom isn't loud. Sometimes it comes in a signature." She nodded. I smiled, not because I was free, but because I finally felt deserving. As I loaded Benji into his car seat, shirt rumpled, day ending, I hugged him close. I tapped my phone screen to send a quick thank you to Detective Reyes. His reply blinked on screen. Stay safe. The late afternoon sky stretched wide and pale. I breathed in the open air. I didn't raise a fist. I didn't scream, but I stood tall. Have you ever faced pressure to stay quiet, only to find strength in speaking up? My phone buzzed as I buckled Benji's seatbelt. Unknown number. I unlocked it. Message read, "You think it's over? Think again." My jaw set. The world outside car windows felt bigger than any courtroom. I clicked off the phone, locked the car, and held my son close. Early morning light slanted through the blinds of our new apartment. Gentle, forgiving. I blinked awake and listened to the quiet. For the first time in months, I slept without trembling. I brushed a gentle hand across Benji's hair to wake him. His sleepy grin cracked the room open, and his laughter echoed like hope. I glanced at the shelf where I had placed the signed agreement folder. It stood there quietly, a marker of dignity reclaimed. I traced a finger along its edge. A house built on lies can't shelter love. The thought felt like a vow. Outside, the world carried on. Inside, I tasted peace. A few days later, I folded myself into a small cafe booth, nursing a black coffee. A community newsletter, a local print sheet passed among neighbors, had published a subtle article about a recent mediation involving estate disputes and allegations of coercion. Names were omitted, but the gist stirred murmurs among people who recognized glances and quiet corners. A neighbor I barely knew dropped by our doorstep that afternoon. She offered a worn card and pressed it into my hands. "If you ever need help, I'm here. I believe you." Her voice was calm, warm, honest. I nodded, holding back tears. Sometimes healing begins in the hush between broken promises. Not everyone found comfort. Word reached me that Karen and Richard were hearing rumors, quiet whispers at church potlucks, sideways glances at school runs. Karen stopped appearing at neighborhood events. I understood then. Truth doesn't always stay behind closed doors. Evelyn sat beside me on the couch that night. We didn't ask for headlines, she said softly. But sometimes the truth leaks, and that's okay. I stared at my hands folded in my lap. I felt torn between sheltering Benji from noise and standing firm in reality. I chose both. The next morning, I met a friend at a cafe. She was a mother too, strong, weary, hopeful. Over coffee and pastry crumbs, we spoke of boundaries, dignity, and what it meant to protect a child with love, not silence. She handed me some legal jargon, asked me to translate terms. I did, patiently. I offered what clarity I had gained. She nodded gratefully. We didn't speak of revenge.
We spoke of respect.
Later, with Benji settled in bed, I told him a bedtime story. Not of princes or castles, but about roots and gardens. I whispered, "We don't build walls. We build maps, so we know where to go when storms come." He yawned, held the edge of my shirt, and snuggled close. His small hand on mine anchored me more than any courtroom ever could. A few afternoons later, I walked past a community garden plot near the apartment complex. The soil looked soft in its fresh tilled rows. On a quiet impulse, I signed a lease for a small backyard garden space. I went to the local nursery and picked out a slender sapling, a young tree, for Benji. I planted it under winter sun, its fragile branches reaching upward. I whispered, "So, you know roots don't come from bricks." I wrote in my journal that night, "Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it grows slowly, like roots under soil." Evelyn poured us tea, and we sat across from each other quietly. We spoke of seasons ahead, of promise rather than fear. No plans for revenge, just hope for growth. Some victories aren't made with applause. They bloom quietly. As night deepened, I heard a key turning at the apartment door. My pulse shifted, reflexive. I stood and looked through the peephole. No shape, just the dull outline of the hallway light. Outside the door lay folded paper. I picked it up with steady hands, unfolded it slowly. The message read, "You can run, but you can't hide truth forever." I exhaled, not in fear, in acceptance. Sometimes the night whispers lies, but daylight teaches us who we've become. I woke to the dull groan of the door handle rattling. It sounded wrong, too forceful, too urgent. Instinct took over. I dropped the blankets, scooped Benji up, and sprinted toward the bathroom. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I closed the door silently behind me, locked it, and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. Outside the walls, voices whispered, low, urgent. I couldn't catch words. Whose? I held the phone tight against my chest, listening. Every creak in the floor felt like a threat. Less than 10 minutes later, flashing lights carved through the darkness. Officers from the local precinct approached the building carefully. I opened the door just enough to whisper that I had a child inside. They called for backup. One officer guided me out with Benji in his arms. The door frame was splintered at the latch side. Whoever tried to get in had failed to break through, but left a scar. Cold December night air stung my lungs. I felt fury, but I wrapped it carefully under calm. Officer Dawson knelt, took photos, fingerprints around the door frame, and informed me they were installing a temporary brace for safety. He spoke quietly. You have rights. If we can link this to someone you suspect, we can press charges. I thought of Karen, her calm masks, her threats, her name flickering through my memory. When Dawson agreed to check the lobby cameras, I exhaled hard. I sent a text to Evelyn. Please come. She arrived minutes later, carrying a spare blanket and soft words for Benji. She looked at the damaged door frame and squeezed my hand.
No tears.
Only a slow, sure resolve. If she wants to haunt my peace, I whispered, she'll meet my boundaries, backed by law. Police canvassed the building. The superintendent cooperated. Evening passed with tension coiled tight inside me. Next morning, I sat across from a lawyer specializing in civil harassment and restraining orders. The room smelled like leather and paperwork. With trembling certainty I signed, legal protections in place, files ready, my voice steady when they asked if I understood. The attorney leaned forward, calm but firm. Justice is slow, he said, but protection can be immediate. A notification soon pinged, voicemail. From Karen, her tone cold, threatening. She said she could reveal everything if I pushed further. My fingers hovered over the delete option. I didn't delete.
I didn't respond.
I saved it. Back home, I installed a reinforced security door. I clicked the locks with a soft sigh, benching fear behind steel. Then I bought a small nightlight in the shape of a lion for Benji, promised him safety in stone when darkness whispered danger. With Evelyn, I started a neighborhood safety circle for single parents, sharing tips, phone numbers, watchfulness. It wasn't revenge. It was community. Late one evening, an envelope slipped under the door. No return address. Inside, a torn photo of me, Richard, and Benji. The family portrait ripped diagonally. Blood red ink scrawled across the fracture. Blood isn't broken easily. I pressed it flat, smoothed the paper, then looked down at Benji's sleeping form. I whispered, I'm not made of blood alone. I'm made of choice. Outside the window, the city pulsed, unaware. Inside, I felt armor settle into my bones. At midnight, my phone rang. The NYPD identifier flashed. Detective Dawson's calm voice said, We have reason to believe this isn't isolated. For your safety, relocation may be recommended. I closed the call. I looked at Benji's breathing rise and fall. I held him close. I didn't feel fear. I felt something else. A steady, quiet courage. Have you ever stood your ground, not out of anger, but quiet conviction? The morning sun hung soft through frosted glass as I walked into the courthouse. I held Benji's small hand loosely, his backpack slung over his shoulder. Both steady, both mine. The city outside hurrying as usual, but inside I felt the weight of months lift slowly. Karen arrived late, her face pale, her suit rumpled, and her voice hesitant. I stood and waited. When called in, I read aloud before Judge Marlowe. I don't seek punishment. I seek peace. My voice did not waver. Behind me sat Evelyn and Officer Dawson, firm testimonies backing my truth. Against a lawyer's attempt to discredit me, the judge leaned forward. This isn't about performance. It's about facts. The order was granted, 500-foot restriction, no contact allowed. I exhaled. For the first time in months, a genuine breath. Later that day, I received a letter from Richard's estate lawyer. My hands shook, but not with fear. Inside was a copy of his updated will, a trust fund for Benji's college, managed solely by me. Despite every betrayal, Richard had tried, perhaps too late, to secure his son's future. I stared at the paper and whispered, he may have failed as a father, but maybe, just maybe, he tried not to fail as a grandfather. Evelyn sat beside me and offered a quiet nod. Some people redeem themselves in silence, not in presence. I decided then, I would never mention it to Karen. Protecting my son's future wasn't revenge. It was legacy safeguarded. That afternoon, Benji and I sat on our favorite park bench eating ice cream in the crisp air. He licked his cone slowly, eyes shining. "Mommy, will I ever have to see them again?" he asked. I smiled, gentle and soft. "Only if you choose to, and I'll be right here if you do." In that moment, his small trust felt heavier than any court verdict. I wrote in my journal later that night, "Winning isn't always about applause. Sometimes it's a soft, steady breath." I finalized paperwork to register our address under a protected registry, a small shield, a small choice to keep living on our terms. A week later, Evelyn and I opened the doors at the community center for a new workshop, a supportive circle for women leaving emotionally abusive family dynamics. 5 women showed up. I stood first, voice steady, calm. "You don't owe anyone your silence," I said. "You only owe yourself safety." Her eyes met mine, solidarity, not pity. The room held soft breaths, gentle nods. Later, Benji dashed in with a crayon drawing, a house with strong walls, surrounded by smiling women holding hands. I lifted him up, kissed his forehead. The tears were quiet, the hope loud. A few days after that, I visited my father's grave for the first time in years. The air was cold, the stone weathered. I knelt, placed a single white rose. I whispered before standing, "I broke the chain, but I didn't break the blood. I chose my own way." The wind picked up, as if blessing the choice. I turned, walked out holding Benji's hand, light falling on the path ahead. Sometimes healing isn't loud. It's quiet. It's private. And deeply yours. If you could leave just one thing behind for someone you love, not money, but a message, what would it be? Sometimes, the hardest wars are the quiet ones, fought with steady breath, not raised voices. Nina didn't win by destroying her enemies. She won by protecting her peace. So here's my question to you. Have you ever walked away not because you were weak, but because you were finally strong enough? If stories like this resonate with you, don't forget to subscribe. More truths, messy, raw, and real, are coming.